The summer heat still clung to the evening air as I made my way across our farmstead. Twilight had begun to settle over the fields, casting long shadows that stretched like fingers across the freshly cut hay. My boots crunched against the gravel path leading to the old barn, a weathered sentinel that had stood on our land for 3 generations. My name is Eli Yoder. At 20 years old, I had known little beyond the boundaries of our Lancaster County farm. The rhythm of my days followed the steady pulse of Amish life. Dawn prayers, field work, communal meals, and evening scripture. Time moved differently here, marked not by minutes, but by seasons, by the height of corn stalks and the call of birds returning north. Eli! My father's voice carried from the porch. Make sure you finish stacking that hay before you come in. Storm's coming tomorrow. I lifted my hand in acknowledgement, not turning back. There was comfort in the predictability of my father's commands, in knowing exactly what was expected of me. I had never questioned this life, had never felt the need to peer beyond the horizon where English lights glowed against the night sky. This was home. This was enough. Or so I had always believed. The barn door groaned as I pushed it open, the familiar scent of hay and livestock wrapping around me like an old quilt. Lantern in hand, I moved through the shadowed interior, past the empty stalls where our horses would return come morning. The air inside hung still and heavy, particles of dust dancing in the last streams of dying daylight that filtered through cracks in the aged wood. I paused at the foot of the ladder leading to the hayloft. For reasons I couldn't name, my heart quickened its pace. Perhaps it was the unusual silence, the absence of the usual creaking and settling of the old structure. Perhaps it was something else entirely. I held the lantern higher, casting light upward into the darkness. Anyone up there? My voice sounded strange to my own ears, too thin, too uncertain. No answer came, yet some instinct told me I wasn't alone. The ladder creaked beneath my weight as I climbed, one hand gripping the worn wood, the other carefully balancing the lantern. Each rung felt like a step into unknown territory, despite having climbed this same path countless times before. My palms grew damp against the wood. My breath came faster. When I reached the top, I held the lantern out before me, illuminating the cavernous space of the loft. Stacks of hay bales lined the walls, their golden edges glowing in the warm light. Dust motes swirled in the air like tiny stars, disturbed by my arrival. The familiar smell of straw and aged wood filled my nostrils. And then I heard it, the soft scuff of boots overhead, coming from the far corner where shadows gathered thickest. My throat tightened. We weren't expecting visitors, and strangers rarely wandered onto Amish property unannounced. I considered calling out again, but found myself frozen. Lantern extended before me like a shield. A single bulb hung from one of the central beams. An old fixture we used sparingly, powered by the generator reserved for essential farm work. It flickered to life without warning, casting a pool of yellow light in the center of the loft. And beneath it stood a young man I had never seen before. He was tall and lean, with shoulders broadened by labor. His sleeves were rolled to the elbows, revealing forearms corded with muscle and dusted with fine golden hair. Unlike me, he wore no suspenders, no plain clothes marking him as Amish. Instead, a faded blue shirt clung to his frame, dampened with sweat around the collar. His hair, too long by our community standards, curled slightly at the nape of his neck. An English farmhand, I realized, probably hired by Jacob Stoltzfus, whose farm bordered ours to the east. The Stoltzfus family had recently begun employing outside help during harvest season, a compromise our elders viewed with quiet disapproval. The stranger was stacking hay bales with practiced efficiency, seemingly unaware of my presence. I watched as he lifted each heavy block, muscles shifting beneath thin fabric, working with a rhythm that suggested years of physical labor. Yet there was something different in his movements, a fluidity, almost a grace, that I had never observed in the men of my community. As if sensing my gaze upon him, he suddenly looked up. Our eyes met across the dusty expanse of the loft. "Oh!" His expression shifted from surprise to a warm smile. "Sorry if I startled you. Jacob sent me over to help with your hay before the storm hits." His voice carried no trace of Pennsylvania Dutch, confirming my assumption that he was English. I remained frozen, lantern still held aloft, unsure how to respond to this unexpected intrusion into my solitary task. Something about his direct gaze made my skin prickle with unfamiliar heat. "I'm Noah," he offered, wiping his palms on his jeans before extending a hand in greeting. Noah Brenner. Manners instilled since childhood finally overcame my strange paralysis. "Eli Yoder," I replied, stepping forward to accept his handshake. His palm pressed against mine, warm, calloused, and somehow different from the countless handshakes I had exchanged at Sunday gatherings. His grip lingered a moment longer than necessary, or perhaps it only seemed that way because I had become hyper-aware of every sensation: the rough texture of his skin, the slight pressure of his fingers, the way my own hand felt suddenly too large and too small all at once. "Well, Eli Yoder," Noah said, releasing my hand and gesturing toward the towering stack of hay bales. "Looks like we'll be working together tonight." I nodded, setting my lantern on a nearby shelf. "Denki, thank you for the help. My father will appreciate it." The words sounded stiff even to my own ears. Noah laughed, a sound that seemed to brighten the dim loft. "No need for thanks. That's what neighbors are for, right?" He picked up another bay, lifting it effortlessly. "Even temporary neighbors." "You're not from here?" I asked, though the answer was obvious. I reached for a bale myself, trying to match his easy strength. "Passing through," Noah replied, stacking his bale atop the growing column. "I work seasonal jobs, 3 months here, 6 months there, wherever hands are needed." He glanced at me over his shoulder. "Never stayed in Amish country before, though. It's different." I felt a familiar defensiveness rise within me. "Different how?" Noah paused, considering. "Quieter. Slower." His eyes met mine again, startlingly blue in the golden light. "More honest, maybe." The defensiveness melted away, replaced by an unexpected warmth spreading through my chest. I turned quickly to hide whatever might have shown on my face, busying myself with another hay bale. We worked in companionable silence for a time, establishing a rhythm together. I would drag the bales closer, and Noah would stack them higher than I could reach. Occasionally, our hands would brush as we passed loads between us, and each time, that strange electric sensation would ripple through me anew. "You ever leave here?" Noah asked suddenly, breaking the quiet. "The farm, I mean." I hesitated, unsure why the simple question made me feel exposed. "For market days, church gatherings, visiting family in other districts." Noah nodded, wiping sweat from his brow with his forearm. The gesture drew my attention to the lean muscles there, the fine sheen of perspiration making his skin glow in the lantern light. "But never just away?" he pressed. "Just to see what's out there?" "There's no need," I replied automatically, repeating words I'd heard throughout my life. "Everything I need is here." Noah made a soft sound. Not quite disagreement, not quite acceptance. "Everything you need, sure. But what about what you want?" The question hung between us, dangerous and tempting. No one had ever asked me to distinguish between necessity and desire. In our community, they were one and the same. Our wants shaped carefully to align with what was deemed necessary for a godly life. Before I could formulate an answer, Noah straightened, stretching his back. "Almost done," he said, surveying our work. "Just a few more." I nodded, grateful for the reprieve from his unsettling question. We finished stacking the remaining bales in silence, the physical exertion a welcome distraction from the confusing thoughts swirling through my mind. When the last bale was in place, Noah dusted his hands and walked toward the small window at the far end of the loft. I followed, drawn to him without quite understanding why. The window hung open, inviting in the evening breeze. Noah leaned against the frame, looking out at the darkening fields. I stood beside him, careful to maintain a proper distance, yet aware of every inch of space between us. Moonlight streamed through the slats of the window, painting silver stripes across Noah's profile. I found myself studying him with an intensity that would have embarrassed me had he noticed. The straight line of his nose, the curve of his jaw, the way his eyelashes caught the moonlight when he blinked. "Beautiful, isn't it?" Noah murmured, gesturing toward the vista of fields and forests stretching toward the horizon. Yeah, I agreed softly. God's creation. Noah turned to look at me then, his expression thoughtful. You see God in all of this? The question surprised me. Of course, don't you? A smile played at the corners of his mouth. I see wonder, he said simply. Whether that's God or something else, I don't know. But there's magic in this world, Eli, in these fields, in that moon. His eyes held mine. In the way some people move through it all. Something in his kihambahiskis made my breath catch. I looked away quickly, back to the safety of the familiar landscape. We should finish up, I said, my voice not quite steady. It's getting late. Wait, Noah said, touching my arm lightly. I want to show you something first. Before I could respond, he was moving across the loft toward the old barn door, not the main entrance below, but a smaller door built into the loft wall, once used for loading hay directly from wagons. It had been sealed shut for years, deemed unsafe by my father. Noah gestured for me to join him, excitement animating his features. Reluctantly, I followed, curious despite my better judgment. Look at this, he said, pointing to something carved into the weathered wood. I stepped closer, our shoulders nearly touching as I leaned in to see. Noah reached past me to run his fingers along a series of intricate carvings etched into the door. Birds in flight, their wings spread wide across the grain of the wood. Did you do this? I asked, astonished by the detail of the work. Noah nodded, a hint of pride in his smile. I've been working on it during breaks. Jacob doesn't mind, as long as the work gets done. It's beautiful, I admitted, tracing one of the birds with my own finger, marveling at how the simple lines captured such a sense of freedom. Turn the latch, Noah suggested, gesturing to the old iron handle. There's more inside. I hesitated, knowing the door had been closed for good reason. It's not safe to open. Just a crack, Noah insisted. Enough to see the inside panel. Against my better judgment, I reached for the latch. As my hand closed around the cold metal, Noah's fingers brushed against mine, guiding my movement. That now familiar current passed between us, stronger than before, shooting up my arm and spreading through my chest. Together, we turned the latch and pulled the door open just enough to reveal the inner face of the wood. There, carved with even greater care, was an image that took my breath away, a perfect rendering of our farm as seen from this very window, each building and field captured in loving detail. When did you... I began, unable to finish the question. I've been watching, Noah said softly, his voice close to my ear, learning the shape of this place, the pattern of life here. The implication that he had been observing our farm, observing me, should have unsettled me. Instead, I felt a strange thrill at the thought of being seen, truly seen, by those attentive eyes. I turned to face him, suddenly aware of how close we stood, of the warmth radiating from his body in the cool evening air. His eyes searched mine, looking for something I couldn't name. We should get back to work, I said again, though we both knew our task was finished. Noah nodded, but neither of us moved. The space between us seemed charged with unspoken words, with possibilities I had never before considered. Finally, he stepped back, breaking the spell. Let's take a break first, he suggested, moving toward a fresh stack of hay bales. He sat down, patting the space beside him. Tell me about yourself, Eli Yoder. I should have declined, should have insisted we return to the house, where my family would be waiting, should have maintained the boundaries that had always kept me safe. Instead, I joined him, sinking into the surprisingly comfortable seat of fresh hay. Its sweet scent rose around us, mingling with the earthy smell of wood and the faint hint of Noah's sweat. What do you want to know? I asked, folding my hands in my lap to hide their slight trembling. Noah leaned back, regarding me with genuine interest. Everything. What's it like growing up Amish? What do you do when you're not working? What makes you laugh? No one had ever asked me such questions, least of all an outsider. Our lives were lived communally. Everyone knew everyone else's business, but personal questions were considered intrusive, even impolite. Yet here in the dimly lit loft, those rules seemed to belong to another world. And so I found myself answering, haltingly at first, then with growing confidence as Noah listened with rapt attention. I told him about our daily routines, about learning to plow behind a team of horses before I could properly tie my shoes. I described the comfort of Sunday gatherings, the shared meals, the sense of belonging to something larger than myself. Without intending to, I even shared my secret joy in caring for injured animals, nursing baby birds and wounded rabbits back to health when no one was watching. A softness considered unsuited for a young man destined to take over his father's farm. In turn, Noah told me of his nomadic existence, of sleeping under stars in Colorado mountains, of swimming in Florida oceans, of cities with buildings that touched the clouds. He spoke of freedom with such longing that I could almost taste it on my own tongue. "Don't you miss having roots?" I asked when he paused for breath. "A place that knows you?" Noah considered this, running a hand through his tousled hair. "Sometimes," he admitted, "but there's a difference between being known and being confined." He met my gaze. "Don't you ever wonder what it would be like to choose your own path?" I looked down at my hands, calloused from labor, strong and capable, yet never having reached for anything beyond what was prescribed for me. "It's not our way," I said softly. "But is it your way, Eli?" Noah pressed gently. "If you could choose any life, would it be this one?" The question struck me like a physical blow. No one had ever suggested that there might be a difference between the community's way and my way, that I might have a choice separate from the one made for me before my birth. I opened my mouth to give the expected answer, that of course I would choose this life, that I was grateful for my place in God's plan. But the words wouldn't come. Instead, I found myself staring into Noah's eyes, searching for something I couldn't articulate. "I don't know," I whispered finally, the admission feeling like both betrayal and relief. Noah's expression softened. "That's okay," he said. "Not knowing is the beginning of finding out." A comfortable silence fell between us then, filled only by the distant sounds of night creatures awakening in the fields and the quiet rhythm of our breathing. I became aware of how our bodies had gradually shifted closer together on the hay bale, our shoulders nearly touching. "Your hair?" Noah said suddenly, reaching toward me. "There's straw." His fingers gently brushed against my temple, tucking a loose strand of hair behind my ear. The touch lingered, his fingertips grazing the side of my neck with feather-light pressure. My skin burned where he touched it, and I found myself holding my breath. No one had ever touched me with such tenderness, such careful attention. Among my people, physical contact was practical, perfunctory. A handshake, a clap on the shoulder, occasionally a brief embrace between family members. This was different, deliberate in a way that made my heart stutter and my thoughts scatter like startled birds. My own fingers trembled with awareness, with the strange new desire to reach out and touch him in return, to discover if his hair felt as taut as it looked, if the skin at his wrist was as warm as it appeared. I did not reach out, could not breach that final boundary. But something must have shown in my face, some echo of the longing that had taken root inside me, because Noah's expression changed. His eyes darkened, and he leaned closer, close enough that I could feel his breath against my cheek. "I've never met anyone like you," he murmured, his voice dropping to a whisper. "Someone so pure in the way you move through this world." The words washed over me like a benediction. Pure. If only he knew the thoughts now racing through my mind, the confusion of desires I had never before acknowledged. Guilt surged through me, sharp and insistent. This was forbidden territory, not just the company of an outsider, but these feelings, these urges pulsing beneath my skin. I had been raised to believe that such desires were sinful, that they corrupted the natural order God had established. Yet in that moment, with moonlight spilling through wooden slats and painting silver stripes across Noah's earnest face, nothing had ever felt more natural, more right, than the pull between us. My breath came faster, my pulse racing. I should leave, should make some excuse and climb down the ladder, return to the safety of the familiar, should pray for forgiveness for even entertaining such thoughts. Instead, I remained frozen in place, caught between terror and longing. The lantern sputtered, its oil running low, casting wavering shadows across the loft. In the dimming light, Noah's hand moved slowly toward mine where it rested on the hay between us. His fingers brushed against my knuckles, tentative at first, then more certain as they slid beneath my palm. He lifted my hand, cradling it between both of his own. The warmth of his skin seemed to seep into my bones, spreading up my arm and into my chest. With deliberate pressure, his thumb pressed into the center of my palm, tracing small circles there. This simple touch felt more intimate than anything I had ever experienced. A silent promise, a question asked without words. Noah raised my hand higher, turning it gently. My breath caught as he lifted his lips almost to the back of my hand, not quite touching, but close enough that I could feel the warmth of his breath against my skin. In that suspended moment, everything I had ever been taught warred with everything I suddenly wanted. The world narrowed to the minuscule space between his lips and my trembling hand. The lantern gave one final flicker, and darkness swallowed the loft. In the sudden blackness, the sensation of Noah's breath against my skin intensified, as though the loss of sight had heightened my other senses. My heart hammered against my ribs. I couldn't see him anymore, but I could feel him, so close, so warm, so frightening in his possibility. And in that darkness, protected from even my own gaze, I found myself leaning forward, drawn by an invisible force I neither understood nor could resist. What would happen next remained hidden in the shadows of that summer night, in the secret space between two souls discovering an unexpected connection amid the hay and dust of an Amish barn loft. But one thing was certain: whatever innocence I had carried into that loft would not be descending with me when morning came. In darkness, time loses meaning. Seconds stretched into eternity as I felt Noah's breath warm against my hand, his lips hovering just above my skin in a promise unfulfilled. The lantern's death had plunged us into blackness, but something else had ignited, a flame that no absence of light could extinguish. Eli. His whisper cut through the shadows, questioning and hopeful. Words failed me. Instead, I answered by closing the infinitesimal gap between us, leaning forward until my forehead rested against his. Our breaths mingled in the darkness, quick and shallow. His hand still held mine, thumb tracing circles in my palm, as though writing secrets only our skin could read. I should go, I whispered, making no move to leave. You should, Noah agreed, his free hand finding my shoulder, fingers curling gently into the fabric of my shirt. How long we remained that way, I cannot say. Eventually, the sound of my name being called from the farmhouse below broke through our shared trance. My father's voice, distant but unmistakable, pulled me back to reality with jarring force. Tomorrow, Noah murmured as I reluctantly pulled away. At dawn, before anyone else is awake. Meet me here. It wasn't a question, yet I answered anyway. I will come. I fumbled in the darkness for the lantern, hands shaking as I relit it with matches from my pocket. The sudden flare illuminated Noah's face, his eyes wide and bright, his expression a mixture of wonder and apprehension that surely mirrored my own. Without another word, I turned and descended the ladder, each step carrying me back toward the life I'd always known, even as my thoughts remained in the loft with him. That night, sleep evaded me. I lay awake in my narrow bed, listening to the steady breathing of my younger brothers in the room we shared, feeling like a stranger among them for the first time in my life. My mind replayed every moment in the loft, every word, every touch, every unspoken promise hanging in the air between us. What was happening to me? I had never questioned my place in our community, had never yearned for anything beyond the boundaries of our farm and our faith. Yet now, my heart raced at the mere thought of dawn, of seeing Noah again in the quiet hours before the day began. I pressed my palms against my eyes, willing these feelings away. This was sin, surely, these unnatural longings for another man. I should confess to Bishop Lapp, should pray for forgiveness and cleansing. But even as these thoughts formed, another voice whispered from deeper within. How could something that felt so genuine, so fundamentally right, be wrong? How could the connection I'd felt with Noah, more honest than any I'd known before, be against God's will? Dawn found me already dressed and slipping silently from the house, moving through pearl-gray mist that clung to the fields like a living thing. The world held its breath in these moments before true daybreak. No birds sang yet, no human voices called across the farmyard. Only my footsteps disturbed the perfect stillness as I made my way to the barn. The massive door stood slightly ajar, a sliver of golden lamplight spilling onto the wet grass. My heart jumped at this evidence of Noah's presence. He had come as promised, was waiting for me as promised. I hesitated, one hand on the rough wood of the door. This was my last chance to turn back, to choose the familiar path laid out for me since birth, to reject the dangerous, exhilarating possibilities that had awakened within me. Instead, I pushed the door open and stepped inside. The lower level of the barn was filled with the comforting sounds and smells of animals stirring in their stalls. Our horses nickered softly in greeting as I passed, familiar with my early morning presence. The cattle shifted in their enclosures, mist from their breath mingling with the natural fog that had followed me inside. At first, I didn't see him. Then movement caught my eye, a figure seated on a bale of straw near the eastern wall, where small windows would soon catch the first light of day. Noah looked up at my approach, his face breaking into a smile that seemed to illuminate the dim space better than any lantern. He wore the same clothes as yesterday, suggesting he hadn't returned to the Stoltzfus farm for the night. The thought that he might have slept here, waiting for me, sent an unexpected warmth through my chest. "You came," he said simply, as though my presence was both expected and miraculous. "I said I would," I replied, suddenly shy under his gaze. He patted the space beside him on the straw bale. In his lap rested a small pad of paper and a pencil. As I sat down, careful to maintain a proper distance between us, I noticed the page was filled with quick, skillful strokes forming the outline of the barn's interior. "You're an artist," I observed, leaning closer to see the details of his drawing. Noah shrugged, a faint color touching his cheeks. "Just sketches. Helps me remember the places I've been." Dawn light began to seep through the windows, painting the eastern wall with pale gold. Noah turned to a fresh page and began to draw again, his pencil moving in swift, sure strokes across the paper. I watched, transfixed, as an image emerged. The barn window framing the rising sun, mist curling around the fence posts outside, a perfect capture of this moment we shared. His hands fascinated me, strong and capable, yet capable of such delicacy and precision. "Why did you ask me to come?" I finally whispered, the question that had kept me awake all night. Noah's pencil paused. He looked up, meeting my eyes, with an intensity that made my breath catch. "Because I couldn't bear the thought of leaving without seeing you again," he admitted. "Because something happened up there in that loft that I've never felt before." My heartbeat quickened. "What happens now?" Noah set his sketchbook aside and turned to face me fully. In the growing light, his features were thrown into sharp relief, the straight line of his nose, the gentle curve of his mouth, the faint shadow of stubble along his jaw. "That depends on you, Eli," he said softly. "I'm just passing through, like I told you. But paths can change. Directions can shift." His eyes searched mine. "If there's reason enough?" The implication hung between us, heavy with possibility and danger. "I don't know what you want from me," I said, though part of me feared I understood all too well. "Nothing you don't want to give," Noah replied. Then, after a pause, "I've spent my days chasing honest work across this country, Eli. Moving from place to place, never settling, never belonging. But you've shown me that some truths live in shadow, not sunlight." His voice dropped lower. "Some honest things must be hidden away, protected from those who wouldn't understand their value." His words resonated within me, giving shape to feelings I had no name for. This connection between us, this fragile, forbidden thing, felt more genuine than many of the approved relationships I'd observed all my life. "The world outside your community isn't perfect," Noah continued. "It's messy and complicated and sometimes cruel. But there are places where people like us can simply be, without hiding, without shame. People like us." The phrase echoed in my mind, simultaneously terrifying and liberating. Was that what I was? Was that who I had always been, beneath the carefully constructed identity of a dutiful Amish son? "I don't know if I can be that person," I confessed, my voice barely audible above the gentle lowing of cattle. "Can I really leave behind the life I know? Can I become the man you deserve beyond these fields?" The questions tumbled out before I could stop them, revealing how far my thoughts had already traveled down this forbidden path. Noah's expression softened. I'm not asking you to decide anything right now. I'm just asking you to consider possibilities you might never have allowed yourself to imagine before. He reached for his pencil again, adding more detail to his sketch as sunlight began to stream more fully through the windows. I watched his profile, memorizing the way the light touched his features, the furrow of concentration between his brows. How long will you stay? I asked, dreading the answer. Another week, maybe 2. Harvest season's nearly done. 2 weeks. 14 days at most to explore these feelings, to decide what they meant, to choose my future path. The brevity terrified me. Noah must have read the fear in my face, for he set his sketchbook aside again and shifted closer to me on the straw bale, our knees now touching. Eli, he said gently, whatever happens, whether you choose to explore this or not, meeting you has already changed something in me. You've reminded me that there's beauty in stillness, in belonging to a place and its traditions. Even if those traditions can sometimes be suffocating, I finished, surprising myself with the admission. Noah nodded, his hand moving to cover mine where it rested on the straw between us. The simple touch sent electricity racing up my arm, just as it had the night before. We don't have to figure everything out right now, he said. Just don't pull away. Not yet. The plea in his voice undid me. Without conscious thought, I turned my hand beneath his, our fingers intertwining. His palm pressed against mine, warm and solid and real. We sat that way as the sun climbed higher, casting longer beams of light across the barn floor, neither of us speaking, both acutely aware of the fragile connection forming between us, and how easily it could be broken by the arrival of my family members to begin the day's chores. Eventually, I reluctantly pulled my hand away. I should go help with breakfast, I said, before they wonder where I am. Noah nodded, understanding in his eyes. Will you come back? Tonight, after your work is done. I hesitated only briefly before nodding. I'll try. As I rose to leave, Noah caught my wrist, his touch gentle but insistent. Eli, he said, his voice low and earnest, whatever you're feeling, whatever questions you're asking yourself, you're not alone. Remember that. I managed a small smile, though my heart was racing. Until tonight, I promised, then turned and walked quickly toward the barn door, feeling his gaze following me every step of the way. The day passed in a blur of routine tasks performed by muscle memory, while my mind remained in the barn with Noah. I helped my mother prepare the morning meal, ate without tasting the food, nodded at my father's instructions without fully hearing them. I moved through familiar motions like a sleepwalker, present in body but absent in spirit. During the communal breakfast, I became uncomfortably aware of the conversation flowing around the table, particularly when Jacob Stoltzfus mentioned his English helper. Strange fellow, that one, Jacob remarked to my father. Skilled worker, mind you, worth the wages, but keeps to himself mostly, always drawing in that little book of his when he should be resting. My father grunted non-committally. English ways are not our concern, so long as they don't interfere with our own. True enough, agreed Elder Yoder, no relation despite the shared surname. But we must be vigilant. The outside world creeps closer each year. Its influence corrupts. I kept my eyes fixed on my plate, feeling heat rise in my cheeks. Did they know? Could they somehow sense the change in me? The forbidden thoughts that had occupied my mind since last night? The Miller boy went English last spring, someone commented. His mother still weeps at every service. A tragedy, my father agreed solemnly. But some seeds fall on rocky ground. We can only pray he finds his way back to the path of righteousness. Their words weighed on me like stones. If they knew the truth of what had transpired in the loft, of the feeling struggling to take root in my heart, would they speak of me with the same mixture of pity and disappointment? Would my mother weep at services, mourning a son lost to sin? I glanced up and found Elder Yoder's gaze fixed on me, his bushy eyebrows drawn together in thoughtful assessment. I quickly looked away, but the damage was done. Had he seen something in my expression, or some evidence of my inner turmoil? Eli, he said, his deep voice cutting through the general conversation. You seem troubled this morning. Is all well with you, young man? Every eye at the table turned to me. I forced myself to meet the elder's gaze with what I hoped was appropriate deference. Just tired, Elder Yoder, I replied, striving for a neutral tone. Was up late finishing the hayloft work. My father nodded, seemingly satisfied with this explanation. The boy works hard, takes his responsibilities seriously. The conversation moved on, but I noticed Elder Yoder's eyes lingering on me a moment longer, assessing, wondering. A chill ran down my spine. In our small community, little remained hidden for long. Secrets had a way of working themselves into the light, like persistent seedlings pushing through soil toward the sun. The remainder of the day passed with excruciating slowness. I threw myself into my chores with unusual vigor, hoping physical exhaustion might quiet my restless thoughts. It didn't. Every task, no matter how demanding, left some part of my mind free to wander back to Noah, to his gentle hands, his questioning eyes, his whispered invitation to a life I had never allowed myself to imagine. As dusk approached, I volunteered to check on the animals one final time before supper, earning an approving nod from my father. My heart pounded as I crossed the yard toward the barn, uncertain whether Noah would be there, both hoping and fearing that he would. The main floor was empty when I entered, the animals settled for the night in their stalls. For a moment, disappointment washed through me. Then I noticed the faint glow of lamplight spilling down from the hayloft above. I climbed the ladder slowly, each rung taking me further from the world I knew and closer to the uncertain territory that lay ahead. When I reached the top, I paused, one hand still gripping the ladder, poised between ascent and retreat. Noah sat cross-legged on a blanket he'd spread across the hay, his sketchbook open before him, a lantern casting warm light across the pages. He looked up at my arrival, his face brightening with a smile that made my hesitation evaporate like morning dew. I wasn't sure you'd come, he said, setting his pencil aside. Neither was I admitted, finally stepping off the ladder onto the loft floor. I remained standing awkwardly by the ladder's landing, suddenly unsure what to do with my hands, my feet, my gaze. Last night's darkness had provided a kind of protection, a veil behind which our connection could form without the harsh scrutiny of daylight. Now, in the golden glow of the lamp, everything felt more real, more dangerous. Noah seemed to sense my uncertainty. He patted the blanket beside him. Come, sit with me. I moved forward hesitantly, lowering myself onto the blanket at a careful distance. Noah returned to his drawing, allowing me the space to gather my thoughts without pressure. After a few minutes of companionable silence, I found the courage to speak. The elders were talking about you today. Noah's pencil paused. Oh? What did they say? Nothing specific, just concerns about English influence. He nodded thoughtfully. And that bothers you? It should, I said, the words coming out more bitterly than I'd intended. My whole life, I've never questioned our ways. Never wanted anything different. I looked down at my hands, calloused from work, strong and capable, yet somehow inadequate for grasping the complex emotions now roiling within me. Until now. Noah set his sketchbook aside entirely and turned to face me, his expression serious. I don't want to be the reason you turn away from your community, Eli. That's not why I'm here. Then why are you here? I asked, meeting his gaze directly. I told you, seasonal work. That's how it started. His voice softened. But now I'm here because of you. Because something's happening between us that I've never felt before. He leaned closer, his voice dropping to near a whisper, even though we were alone. Here, with you, I am no longer bound by simple chores. I am alive. The intensity in his eyes, the rawness of his confession, stole my breath away. No one had ever spoken to me this way, with such naked honesty and vulnerability. In our community, emotions were kept carefully regulated, expressions of feeling considered self-indulgent at best, sinful at worst. I don't know how to do this, I whispered, my voice breaking slightly. I don't know what this is. Noah's hand moved to cover mine, his touch gentle but grounding. It's whatever we want it to be, Eli. There are no rules here. Not really. But there were rules. So many rules that had shaped every moment of my life until now. Rules that had seemed like protection, like guidance, but suddenly felt like prison bars. The conflict must have shown on my face, for Noah's expression softened. I'm not asking you to choose right now, he said gently. Just to be here, in this moment, with me. Something in his words, in the quiet acceptance behind them, broke through the last of my resistance. I turned my hand beneath his, our fingers intertwining just as they had that morning. Only this time, I didn't pull away. We sat that way for what seemed like hours, hands joined, occasionally exchanging soft words about nothing of consequence. The weather, the harvest, small observations about the farm. All the while, I was acutely aware of him beside me, the rhythm of his breathing, the warmth radiating from his body, the faint scent of hay and sweat, and something uniquely his own. Eventually, our conversation dwindled into comfortable silence. The lantern flickered, casting dancing shadows across the wooden beams above us. Outside, night creatures began their chorus, crickets chirping, an occasional owl hooting in the distance. I should go, I thought. My family would be wondering about my prolonged absence. Yet I couldn't bring myself to move, to break this fragile bubble of peace we'd created. Noah shifted beside me, his shoulder now pressing against mine. The contact sent a shiver through me, both thrilling and terrifying. I turned to look at him and found his face inches from my own, his eyes questioning, hopeful. Eli, he whispered, my name a prayer on his lips. What happened next seemed both inevitable and miraculous. I leaned forward, or perhaps he did, and suddenly the space between us vanished. His lips met mine, tentative at first, a question rather than a demand. For a heartbeat, I remained frozen, overcome by the newness of the sensation, by the enormity of the line we were crossing. Then something broke loose within me, some final restraint, some last barrier, and I was kissing him back, my hand rising to cup his cheek, his stubble rough against my palm. His arms encircled me, drawing me closer, and I went willingly, lost in the overwhelming rightness of his embrace. The kiss deepened, grew bolder. We clung to each other in the narrow aisle between haystacks, every point of contact between us a revelation. His hands traced patterns across my back, tangled in my hair, ignited fires wherever they touched. I responded with equal fervor, years of denied passion finding expression at last. A sudden creak from below, the barn door opening, tore us apart. We froze, listening intently, terror replacing desire in an instant. Had someone come looking for me? Were we about to be discovered? Footsteps crossed the lower level, then paused. A voice called out. My younger brother, Samuel. Eli, are you still in here? Mother says supper's waiting. I cleared my throat, praying my voice would sound normal. Yeah, I'll be right there, just finishing up. There was a moment's hesitation, then, do you need help? No, I replied, too quickly. No, I'm almost done. Go on back. Another pause, longer this time. Then the sound of retreating footsteps, the creak of the door closing. Noah and I remained motionless, hardly daring to breathe until we were certain Samuel had gone. Then, simultaneously, we exhaled, relief flooding through us. That was close, Noah whispered, his hand finding mine again in the semi-darkness. The near discovery had shattered the spell of our moment together, bringing reality crashing back with brutal force. What were we doing? The consequences, if we'd been caught, would have been devastating. Shunning for me at the very least, perhaps worse for Noah as the corrupting outsider. Yet even as these fears coursed through me, I couldn't bring myself to regret what had happened between us. The memory of his lips on mine, of his arms around me, felt too precious, too genuine to reject. I have to go, I said reluctantly, already rising to my feet. Noah stood as well, his expression a mixture of understanding and longing. Tomorrow? He asked, hope evident in his voice. I hesitated, torn between caution and desire. It's too dangerous here, I said finally. Someone could come in any time. A thought occurred to me. Do you know the small meadow past the cornfield? The one with the old oak tree? Noah nodded. I've seen it. Meet me there tomorrow at dusk, I suggested. It's far enough from the farm that no one will disturb us. A smile spread across his face, lighting his features even in the dim glow of the lantern. I'll be there. I turned to go, but Noah caught my hand, pulling me back for one more brief, searing kiss that left me dizzy with longing. Then he released me, and I descended the ladder on shaking legs, my mind already counting the hours until tomorrow's meeting. The following day passed in an agony of anticipation. I moved through my chores mechanically, barely registering the concerned glances my mother cast my way, or the narrowed eyes of Elder Yoder when he stopped by to speak with my father. As dusk approached, I made my excuses, checking fence lines in the north pasture I claimed, and set off across the fields, heart pounding with equal measures of excitement and trepidation. The meadow lay golden in the fading light, wildflowers nodding in the gentle evening breeze. The old oak stood sentinel at its center, its massive branches creating a canopy of rustling leaves overhead. I arrived first, sitting with my back against the rough bark, watching as the sky turned from blue to lavender to deeper purple. I heard his approach before I saw him, footsteps through the high grass, a twig snapping underfoot. Then Noah emerged from the shadow of the cornfield, his familiar figure silhouetted against the darkening sky. Something in my chest tightened at the sight of him, a physical response I couldn't control. He came to me without words, sitting beside me beneath the oak, his shoulder pressed against mine. For a long moment, we simply sat in companionable silence, watching as the first stars appeared overhead. I've been thinking about you all day, Noah finally said, his voice soft in the gathering darkness. About last night? I nodded, unable to express how his words mirrored my own experience, how thoughts of him had consumed me, distracted me, nearly caused me to pour feed into the wrong trough that morning. Are you afraid? He asked, turning to study my profile. Yes, I admitted, seeing no point in denial. But not of this. Not of you. I gestured vaguely toward the distant farm. Of them, of losing everything I've ever known. Noah was quiet for a moment, considering. What if you gained something better? The question hung between us, weightier than it might appear on the surface. What could be better than the security of family, community, tradition? What could be worth the pain of separation, the knowledge that I would be forever cut off from everyone I'd ever loved? I don't know, I answered honestly. I can't imagine a life different from this one. Then let me help you imagine, Noah said, taking my hand in his. There are cities where men like us can live openly, Eli. Places where we could build a life together, find work, make friends who understand, even create a kind of family. His thumb traced patterns on my palm, sending shivers up my arm. It wouldn't be easy at first, but we wouldn't be alone. The picture he painted was simultaneously terrifying and alluring. A life free from secrecy and shame, yet stripped of everything familiar, everything safe. What would we do? I asked, allowing myself, just for a moment, to entertain the possibility. Where would we go? I have friends in Philadelphia, Noah replied. They could help us get started. I have skills, carpentry, drawing. You're strong, capable. We'd find our way. His confidence both reassured and unsettled me. How could he be so certain when everything about this felt so precarious? And if it didn't work, I pressed, if we failed? Noah turned to face me fully, his expression serious in the fading light. Then you'd have a choice to make, but at least it would be your choice, Eli, not one made for you by others. A choice. The word resonated within me. How few true choices I'd been given in my life, almost everything predetermined by tradition, by community expectations, by the narrow path laid out for Amish men since before my birth. I'm afraid, I confessed again, my voice barely audible above the evening breeze rustling through the oak leaves. Noah's arm slipped around my shoulders, drawing me closer. I know, he murmured against my hair. I am too. The admission surprised me. Noah had seemed so confident, so certain in his path. What are you afraid of? He was quiet for a long moment before answering. Of asking too much of you. Of taking you away from everything you know. Only to discover that I'm not enough to make up for what you've lost. His voice dropped lower. Of loving you more than you can ever love me in return. Loving you. The word sent a shock through my system. Was that what this was? This consuming need to be near him? This ache when we were apart? This sense that something fundamental had shifted inside me since our first meeting? I don't know what love is supposed to feel like, I said tearfully, working through my thoughts as I spoke. We don't talk about such things in my family. Marriages are arranged for practicality, for continuing bloodlines, for joining properties. I turned to look at him, studying the contours of his face in the gathering darkness. But I think about you when you're not there. I feel more alive when we're together. I hesitated, unused to expressing wants, to acknowledging desires. I want to know you in every way possible. Is that love? Noah's smile was tender, his eyes bright even in the dim light. It's a good start, he said softly, leaning forward to press his forehead against mine. We stayed that way, breathing each other in, until the stars were fully visible overhead and the evening chill had deepened. Then Noah kissed me, a gentle, unhurried exploration that set my blood singing in my veins. I responded eagerly, all hesitation forgotten in the shelter of darkness and distance from the farm. When we finally broke apart, both breathless, Noah spoke against my lips. You're not just the secret I carry. You're the life I want to build beside. His words undid me completely. Tears pricked at my eyes, unexpected and unwelcome. I had never cried in front of another person, had been taught since childhood that men controlled their emotions, showed strength rather than vulnerability. Yet here, in Noah's arms, beneath the ancient oak and countless stars, I allowed myself to weep, for the self I had never known existed, for the possibilities suddenly stretching before me, for the painful choice that loomed on the horizon. Noah held me through it all, his embrace solid and reassuring, his hands steady as they stroked my back, my hair, my face. When the storm of emotion finally passed, leaving me drained but somehow lighter, he wiped the last tears from my cheeks with gentle thumbs. We still have time, he reminded me softly. Nothing has to be decided tonight. I nodded, grateful for his patience, for the space he gave me to process these overwhelming feelings at my own pace. We spent the remainder of the evening talking of simpler things, his travels across the country, my knowledge of farming and animals, shared observations about the night sky above us. When the moon rose, casting silver light across the meadow, we reluctantly agreed it was time to part. Tomorrow, Noah asked, helping me to my feet. Tomorrow, I confirmed, already dreading the hours that would separate us. The following days established a pattern. During daylight hours, I performed my duties on the farm, increasingly aware of suspicious glances from my father and the elders, of whispered conversations that ceased when I entered a room. By night, I met Noah in our meadow, each encounter deepening the connection between us, each parting more painful than the last. A week passed this way, 7 precious days of discovery and joy mixed with growing anxiety. Noah's time in Lancaster County was drawing to a close. Soon, he would move on to his next job, his next temporary home. The unspoken question hung between us. Would I go with him? On the 8th night, as we lay side by side beneath the oak, watching stars emerge in the velvety darkness above, Noah finally broached the subject directly. I leave in 3 days, he said quietly, his fingers intertwined with mine. Jacob's keeping me on an extra week, but the harvest is nearly complete. Though I had known this moment was coming, the words still struck me like a physical blow. 3 days, 72 hours to make a decision that would alter the course of my life irrevocably. Come with me, Eli, Noah continued, propping himself up on one elbow to look into my face. We can leave together, start fresh somewhere new. The earnestness in his expression, the naked hope in his voice, made my chest ache. How simple it sounded when he said it that way. Just leave, just start over, just choose him over everything I'd ever known. My family, I began, but couldn't continue. The thought of never seeing them again, of knowing I had broken my mother's heart, my father's trust, was almost unbearable. I know, Noah said gently. I'm not asking for an answer right now. Just promise me you'll think about it. Really think about it. I nodded, unable to speak past the lump in my throat. Noah reached into his pocket, withdrawing a small leather-bound notebook, similar to his sketchbook, but smaller, more weathered. I want you to have this, he said, pressing it into my hands. I opened it carefully, leafing through pages filled with sketches, sunrises and sunsets from different landscapes, buildings I'd never seen, faces of strangers, and then, on the final pages, images that made my breath catch. The barn loft bathed in golden light, the meadow where we now lay, and most startling of all, a careful pencil portrait of me. Eyes downcast, expression thoughtful, rendered with such tenderness that it brought fresh tears to my eyes. Noah, I can't. Keep it, he insisted, closing my fingers around the notebook. If you decide to stay, it will give you something to remember me by. His voice softened further. And if you choose to come with me, bring it. It's a map of everywhere I've been. And now, everywhere that matters to us. I clutched the precious gift to my chest, overwhelmed by its significance. Thank you, I whispered. Noah leaned forward, capturing my lips in a kiss that felt like both promise and plea. When we finally parted, the decision still loomed, unspoken between us. The next 2 days passed in a blur of heightened anxiety. Rumors had indeed begun to circulate through our small community. Whispers about the English farmhand who kept to himself, about my increasingly distracted behavior, about late-night absences that hadn't gone unnoticed. Elder Yoder cornered me after Sunday service, his bushy eyebrows drawn together in concern. The devil finds work for idle hands, Eli, he said gravely, and for wandering hearts. I mumbled something non-committal, unable to meet his penetrating gaze, and hurried away as soon as politeness allowed. The encounter left me shaken, convinced that discovery was imminent, that my time for decision was running out. On what was to be our final evening together, I arrived at the meadow to find Noah already waiting. He stood at the field's edge, where the tall corn gave way to open grass, his figure silhouetted against the setting sun. The sight of him, so familiar now, yet still capable of making my heart race, sent a pang through my chest. He turned at my approach, his face breaking into that smile I had come to cherish. Without words, we moved into each other's arms, holding tight as though the embrace could somehow suspend time, postpone the choice that could no longer be avoided. Eventually, Noah pulled back just enough to look into my eyes. Have you decided? He asked, his voice steady despite the vulnerability evident in his expression. I hesitated, torn between two impossible choices. I don't know if I can do it, I admitted, the words painful to speak aloud. Leave everything behind. Everyone. Disappointment flickered across Noah's features, quickly masked but not quickly enough. I understand, he said, his hands falling away from my arms. No, I said quickly, reaching for him again. I don't think you do. It's not that I don't want to be with you. It's that I'm terrified of failing, of not being strong enough to live in your world. Noah's expression softened. He reached up to cup my face between his hands, his touch gentle but grounding. My world isn't so different from yours at its core, Eli, he said quietly. People still work hard, still care for each other, still search for meaning. They just do it with more choices, more freedom. His thumbs brushed across my cheekbones. And I would be there with you, every step of the way. The sincerity in his voice nearly undid me. I wanted so desperately to believe him, to trust that we could forge a path together in a world I barely understood. Can I really leave behind the life I know? I whispered, giving voice to my deepest fear. Can I become the man you deserve beyond these fields? Noah's eyes held mine, steady and sure. You already are that man, Eli. You always have been. You just haven't been free to live as him. He pressed his forehead to mine. But the choice has to be yours. I won't ask you to sacrifice everything for me if you're not ready. The sun had nearly disappeared beyond the horizon now, casting long shadows across the meadow. Darkness gathered around us, as if the night itself were urging secrets into the open before dawn could expose them. I leave tomorrow, Noah said, his voice breaking slightly. After I finish at Jacob's farm, I've arranged passage to Philadelphia on a transport truck. He paused, drawing a deep breath. If you decide, if you want to come with me, you will meet me here at sunset. If not... He didn't finish the sentence, but he didn't need to. If not, we would never see each other again. The finality of it struck me with physical force. One day. I had one day to decide the course of my entire future. Noah must have sensed my rising panic, for he pulled me close again, his arms encircling me with reassuring strength. Don't decide now, he murmured against my hair. Sleep on it. Pray on it, if that helps. Listen to what your heart is telling you. We stayed that way for a long time, wrapped in each other's embrace as the first stars appeared overhead. When we finally separated, it was with the awareness that this might be our last time together. No matter what you choose, Noah said, his voice thick with emotion. These days with you have been the most real of my life. He slipped the small leather-bound notebook, filled with sketches of dawn light and that single precious portrait of me, into my hand and said, if you ever choose courage over fear, find me here where our secrets live. Then he kissed me one last time, a kiss that felt like both blessing and farewell before turning and walking away, disappearing into the mist that had begun to gather along the edge of the cornfield. I stood alone in the meadow, heart pounding, the notebook clutched to my chest, torn between duty and the world that now beckoned with both promise and uncertainty. The night offered no answers, only the soft rustle of corn leaves in the breeze and the weight of a decision that would define the rest of my life. Dawn found me sitting on the edge of my bed, sleepless and hollow-eyed. I had spent the night in silent turmoil, alternating between prayer and restless pacing, between memories of Noah's touch and visions of my family's grief should I choose to leave. The leather notebook lay hidden beneath my mattress, but its presence seemed to pulse through the room like a heartbeat, a constant reminder of the choice awaiting me. I moved through the morning chores mechanically, avoiding my father's questioning gaze, my mother's concerned touch on my arm. Each familiar task felt weighted with new significance, knowing it might be the last time I performed it. You look tired, son, my father commented as we worked side by side in the barn. Is something troubling you? The concern in his voice nearly broke my resolve. How could I tell him that I was contemplating abandoning everything he had taught me, everything he valued? That I had discovered feelings within myself that our community considered sinful, abhorrent. Just thinking about the future, I replied, the words technically true, yet woefully inadequate. He nodded, seeming satisfied with my answer. A man should consider his path carefully, he said, his hand coming to rest briefly on my shoulder. But remember, Eli, the straightest road is not always the easiest one. I looked at him sharply, wondering if his words held some deeper meaning, if he somehow sensed the conflict raging within me. But his expression remained placid, untroubled. This was simply another of his familiar homilies, not a commentary on my specific struggle. As the day progressed, I found myself cataloging details I had always taken for granted. The specific creak of the barn door, the pattern of light through the kitchen window at noon, the sound of my mother humming as she worked in the garden. Each observation felt like both memory and farewell. By mid-afternoon, my decision remained unmade, my heart still torn between two impossible choices. I retreated to the barn loft, the place where everything had begun, hoping to find clarity in solitude. The space felt eerily empty without Noah's presence, yet everywhere I looked, I found evidence of our time together. The hay bale where we had sat side by side, the corner where we had almost kissed in darkness, the old door with its hidden carvings. I approached that door now, running my fingers over the wooden latch, just as we had done together that first night. The memory sent a shiver through me, the electric current of his fingers brushing mine, the wonder of discovery, the first stirrings of feelings I had never known existed. Carefully, I pulled the door open just enough to reveal the inner carving, the detailed rendering of our farm that Noah had created with such care and attention. I traced the lines with my fingertip, marveling again at the skill evident in each stroke, at the way he had captured not just the physical layout, but somehow the essence of the place that had been my only home. And in that moment, studying his art, I realized something profound. Noah had seen this place, truly seen it, in a way I never had before. Through his eyes, our simple farm became something beautiful, something worth preserving in pencil and paper. Through his presence, my ordinary life had been transformed into something vibrant and new. Yet he had also shown me horizons I had never imagined, possibilities that stretched far beyond these familiar fields. He had awakened in me a yearning for something more, not just his touch, his presence, but a life lived authentically, without hiding essential parts of myself. Could I really leave all this behind? The question still haunted me, but now another joined it. Could I really stay, now that I knew what else might be possible? I closed the door gently and descended the ladder, my mind still churning with indecision. As I crossed the barnyard, I noticed Elder Yoder's buggy approaching down the lane. My stomach tightened with apprehension. Had someone seen Noah and me together? Were the rumors about to become accusations? I considered retreating back into the barn, but knew that would only postpone the inevitable. Instead, I continued toward the house, steeling myself for whatever confrontation might await. Elder Yoder greeted my father solemnly, then turned his piercing gaze on me. "Eli," he said, nodding slightly. "I was hoping to speak with you." My father glanced between us, curiosity evident in his expression. "You can use the front room," he offered. "Your mother and I will be in the kitchen." The elder gestured for me to precede him into the house. I did so with leaden feet, convinced that my secret had been discovered. That punishment was about to be meted out. Once the door closed behind us, Elder Yoder settled himself in my father's chair, regarding me with those keen eyes that seemed to miss nothing. "I've known you since you were a babe in arms, Eli Yoder," he began, his deep voice filling the small room. "Watched you grow into a fine young man. Strong, dutiful," he paused significantly. "Until recently." I remained silent, unsure how to respond. "There has been talk," he continued, "about your friendship with the English worker." His bushy eyebrows drew together. "Talk that troubles me deeply." My heart pounded so violently, I was certain he must hear it. Still, I said nothing, neither confirming nor denying. The elder sighed heavily. "The path of righteousness is narrow, Eli. The world outside our community offers many temptations, false freedoms that lead only to spiritual bondage." His gaze intensified. "Whatever this outsider has promised you, whatever dreams he has painted, know this: they are illusions. Mirages that will vanish the moment you reach for them." How could I explain that what I had found with Noah felt more real, more genuine than anything I had experienced before? That far from being an illusion, his presence had awakened me to truths I had long suppressed? "The community is prepared to forgive youthful indiscretion," Elder Yoder continued, "to welcome the prodigal who returns with a repentant heart. But first, you must renounce this unnatural attachment." The word unnatural stung like a physical blow. Was that truly how they would see my feelings? As something perverse, something to be corrected or cast out? "With respect, Elder Yoder," I finally spoke, my voice steadier than I expected. "How can love be unnatural?" The word love hung in the air between us, shocking in its directness. The elder's eyes widened slightly, then narrowed in concern. "What you feel is not love, Eli," he said firmly. "It is confusion, temptation, the enemy's work to lead you astray." "It doesn't feel like confusion," I replied quietly. "It feels like waking up." Elder Yoder rose abruptly, his expression troubled. "I see the corruption has progressed further than I feared." He moved toward the door, then paused, looking back at me with genuine sadness in his aged face. "Pray for guidance, Eli. Return to the fold before it's too late." His voice softened slightly. "Your family loves you. Your community needs you. Don't throw away everything for a momentary passion that can never bear fruit." With those parting words, he left, leaving me alone in the silent room, his warnings echoing in my mind alongside memories of Noah's touch, Noah's voice, Noah's promise of a different life. The elder's visit, rather than clarifying my path, had only intensified my inner conflict. The weight of community expectations pressed down on me like a physical burden, while the pull toward Noah, toward freedom, toward an authentic life, tugged with equal force in the opposite direction. As the afternoon waned toward evening, I found myself drawn to my parents' bedroom, a space I rarely entered. On the simple dresser sat my mother's most prized possession, a small mirror in a wooden frame, one of the few decorative items allowed in our austere home. I stood before it now, studying my reflection as though seeing myself for the first time. The same face that had looked back at me all my life, yet somehow different. Eyes more alive, more questioning. Jaw set with a determination I hadn't recognized before. Was this the face of a man who could leave everything behind? Who could step into an unknown world with only love as compass and anchor? Or was it the face of a man bound by duty and tradition, destined to suppress his true nature for the comfort of conformity? The mirror offered no answers, only the silent reflection of my own uncertainty. The sun began its descent toward the horizon, golden light slanting through the windows, reminding me that time was running out. Soon, Noah would be waiting in our meadow, hoping I would come, prepared to leave alone if I did not. I moved to the window, looking out across the farmland that had been my entire world for 20 years. The fields stretched toward distant hills, familiar and beautiful in the evening light. My father worked in the garden below, his movements steady and sure, untroubled by the kind of doubt that now consumed me. What would he say if he knew the truth? Would he cast me out in anger or weep with disappointment? Would he pray for my soul or strike my name from family records as though I had never existed? And my mother, gentle, devout, loving in her quiet way, how would she bear the knowledge that her eldest son had chosen a path she could neither understand nor follow? The question circled endlessly, offering no resolution, no peace. Outside, the shadow of our barn lengthened across the yard as the sun sank lower. Time was slipping away, the moment of decision approaching with each passing minute. I left the window and moved to my small room, retrieving Noah's notebook from its hiding place beneath the mattress. I opened it again, fingers tracing the lines of his sketches. Landscapes I had never seen. Moments he had captured with such care and attention. And there, on the final page, my own face looked back at me, rendered with a tenderness that made my throat tighten. Noah had seen me, truly seen me, in a way no one else ever had. If you ever choose courage over fear, he had said, find me here, where our secrets live. Courage over fear, the words resonated within me, clarifying something that had been struggling to take shape in my mind all day. I had spent my life surrounded by rules designed to protect me from the outside world, from its temptations, its complexities, its dangers. Those boundaries had provided safety, structure, a clear path to follow. But they had also kept me from discovering an essential truth about myself, from experiencing the kind of connection I had found with Noah. Was it more courageous to stay within those boundaries, to honor the traditions and expectations of my community? Or to step beyond them into uncertainty, guided only by the compass of my own heart? The answer came not in words, but in a sudden, overwhelming certainty, a clarity that swept through me like a summer storm, powerful and purifying. I tucked the notebook carefully into my shirt, close to my heart. Then I gathered a few essential items, a change of clothes, the small amount of money I had saved over years of market days, a pocket knife given to me by my grandfather. I wrote a letter to my parents, inadequate, halting words that could never fully explain the choice I was making, but might at least let them know that I loved them still, that my departure was not a rejection of them, but an embrace of my true self. As the sun touched the horizon, painting the western sky in shades of gold and crimson, I slipped quietly from the house across the yard and into the fields beyond. No one called after me. No one noticed my departure. It was, in its way, a mercy. The path to our meadow was etched in my memory, feet moving automatically across familiar ground, even as my mind raced ahead to what awaited. Fear and excitement warred within me, each step carrying me further from everything known, closer to an uncertain future. When I reached the edge of the cornfield, I paused, looking back one last time at the farm that had been my entire world. From this distance, it looked smaller somehow, contained and complete without me. The thought brought both pain and a strange relief. Life would continue here, following its ordained patterns, while I forged a different path. I turned away and stepped into the meadow, my heart pounding against my ribs. The oak tree stood sentinel at the center, just as it always had, its branches spread wide against the darkening sky. And there, beneath its canopy, waiting exactly as he had promised. Noah. He saw me immediately, his posture straightening, hope and uncertainty playing across his features as I walked toward him. Neither of us spoke until I stood directly before him, close enough to see the flecks of gold in his blue eyes, the slight tremble of his hands at his sides. "You came," he said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. I nodded, unable to form words past the emotion clogging my throat. Instead, I reached into my shirt and withdrew his notebook, holding it up between us, proof of my choice, my answer to his invitation. Noah's face transformed, joy breaking across his features like dawn after the longest night. He reached for me, and I went willingly into his embrace, all doubt dissolving in the solid reality of his arms around me. "Are you sure?" he asked against my ear, giving me one final chance to reconsider. In answer, I pulled back just enough to look into his eyes. "I choose courage," I said simply. "I choose you." His smile was like sunrise, brilliant and full of promise. He took my hand in his, our fingers intertwining as naturally as if they had been designed for this purpose alone. Together, we turned away from the farm, away from the only life I had known, and walked toward the mist-shrouded road beyond the meadow. Each step carried us further from the past, closer to a future we would build together, uncertain, challenging, but gloriously, terrifyingly free. Behind us, the old oak stood witness to our departure, keeper of secrets whispered among its branches, guardian of the place where I had finally discovered my true self. In the arms of a wandering artist who had shown me horizons I had never dared to imagine. And in that moment, stepping into the unknown with Noah's hand warm in mine, I understood that what I was leaving behind was not my home, but merely the shell of one. My true home, the place where I belonged without pretense or fear, walked beside me now, into whatever awaited us beyond these fields.